In the early hours of March 2012, a horrific discovery shook the streets of Los Angeles. The body of 23-year-old Amara Hayes was found lifeless in a luxury hotel room in downtown Los Angeles, an incident that would soon unravel a chain of events so dark that it would tear apart lives, expose deadly secrets, and bring down the once revered mega-church pastor Malachai Grant. The Kingdom of Light Ministries, located in the heart of Beverly Hills, was a beacon of hope for many. People traveled from all corners to attend the church, drawn to the promises of salvation and prosperity. It was here that the life of Amara Hayes would tragically intertwine with that of Malachai Grant. But the consequences of this connection would reach far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Amara Hayes was not born into privilege. Growing up in the tough neighborhoods of South Central Los Angeles, Amara learned from an early age that life was not always kind. Her father, an ex-convict, was a distant figure in her life, and her mother, who struggled with addiction, was often absent for long periods, leaving Amara to care for her younger siblings. By the age of 10, Amara had taken on responsibilities far beyond her years, managing a chaotic household while trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Despite these hardships, Amara had a resilient spirit. She was determined to rise above her circumstances and carve out a better life for herself. At the age of 15, she found a ray of light in a place she never expected: a church. A friend from school invited her to a youth service at Kingdom of Light Ministries, and it changed her life forever. Kingdom of Light Ministries was a world apart from the world Amara had known. The sprawling church building in Beverly Hills gleamed with opulence, gold accents, towering chandeliers, and a sense of grandeur that took Amara's breath away. The church was a sanctuary for many, a place where people could escape the difficulties of life and find solace in the words of Pastor Malachai Grant. Malachai was not just a pastor, he was a force of nature. His words were magnetic, his presence commanding. His sermons, delivered with passion and conviction, promised prosperity, happiness, and a divine purpose. To Amara, it felt like she had found a place where she truly belonged. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, heard, and understood. It didn't take long for Pastor Malachai to notice Amara. After that first service, he made a point to greet her personally, his kindness and charm immediately apparent. His words, "You have the light the world needs to see," resonated deeply within her. It was a sentiment she would hold on to for the rest of her life. As Amara began to attend Kingdom of Light more regularly, she found herself drawn deeper into the church's vibrant community. She volunteered her time helping with youth programs and events, and quickly became a trusted figure within the congregation. The church became her second family, and she felt truly at home there. But it wasn't just the church community that Amara found solace in. Pastor Malachai became a personal mentor, guiding her through difficult life decisions and encouraging her to pursue a higher education. He often told her she had the power to change the world, and Amara believed him. Over time, however, the relationship between Amara and Malachai began to shift. What had once been purely mentorship began to take on a more personal, more intense form. Private meetings in his office, late-night phone calls, and a growing sense of closeness made Amara feel conflicted but also deeply connected to Malachai. He had become someone she looked up to, someone she admired and trusted. However, it wasn't just admiration that was growing in Amara. There was something else, something more complicated. Malachai's behavior began to change. His interest in her seemed to go beyond just guiding her future. It was as if he was trying to control her life. He would ask questions about where she was going, who she was spending time with, and what she was doing. At first, Amara thought it was just his way of showing concern, but soon it became stifling. She began to question whether Malachai's actions were truly out of care or whether he was trying to keep her under his thumb. By June 2011, the relationship between Amara and Malachai had crossed a dangerous line. What started as mentorship had morphed into a secret, forbidden affair. It was something neither of them had planned, but it had grown beyond control. Malachai was a married man with a public image of a loving husband to his wife Vanessa Grant, who was as much a part of the Kingdom of Light's image as Malachai himself. Together they were seen as the royal family of faith, an ideal couple that embodied the values the church preached. But Amara had begun to see the cracks in their seemingly perfect marriage. Malachai's affection for her was no longer hidden, and she became acutely aware of the tension that existed beneath the surface of his public life. He would constantly remind her that his marriage, his family, and the church's reputation were at stake. Yet at the same time he continued the affair, manipulating Amara with promises of love, success, and a future that would be shared only between them. The breaking point came in January 2012 when Amara discovered she was pregnant. The realization hit her like a freight train, and for days she was consumed with fear and anxiety. What would she do? What would Malachai say? What about Vanessa, his wife? The scandal of the affair was one thing, but this was something she couldn't hide. When Amara finally told Malachai, she hoped he would be supportive. Instead, his reaction was cold, calculating, and dismissive. His first concern was not her but how this would affect his carefully constructed life. "This pregnancy can happen," he told her, his voice stern and emotionless. "It will destroy everything I've worked for. Think about the church, think about my family." For the first time, Amara realized that she had been nothing more than a pawn in Malachai's game, a threat to his image that needed to be dealt with. His words haunted her, and she found herself more isolated than ever. As the days passed after Amara's conversation with Malachai, the weight of her pregnancy began to bear down on her with an intensity that was both crushing and suffocating. The emotional toll was unbearable. She had always felt connected to Malachai, but now she saw him for what he truly was, a man whose ambitions and desire for control far outweighed any sense of morality. His promises of a future together, of raising their child in secrecy, dissolved into whispers of threats and caution. In the weeks that followed, Amara struggled in isolation. She found herself torn between two worlds, one of false hope and empty promises, and another the painful reality of a man she had once revered now showing his true, ruthless nature. Malachai had made it clear that he could not allow the pregnancy to continue. His reputation as a man of faith, the golden boy of the church, could not survive such a scandal. "You need to understand, Amara," he told her in a cold, detached voice. "The church, my family, and everything I've built would collapse if anyone finds out about this." For Amara, his words were like knives to her heart. The man who had once been a mentor, a figure of wisdom and guidance, now seemed like a stranger. Yet despite his coldness, there was an undeniable pull she felt toward him. The complex emotions of love, fear, and dependence clouded her judgment, making it almost impossible to see the manipulation that was unfolding. Meanwhile, Vanessa Grant, Malachai's wife, continued to stand by her husband's side, blissfully unaware of the turmoil brewing just beneath the surface. To the public eye, she was the perfect pastor's wife, beautiful, composed, and elegant. But in reality, she was a woman in denial, unable to see the cracks in the facade of her marriage. Vanessa had always been devoted to the kingdom of light, believing in the mission of the church and her husband's vision. She loved him deeply, but the cracks in their relationship had been growing for years, even if she refused to acknowledge them. The most chilling part of the story was how expertly Malachai kept both women, Amara and Vanessa, in the dark about each other. He had mastered the art of deception, using his charm and authority to convince each of them that they were the most important woman in his life. While Amara was isolated and struggling with her pregnancy, Vanessa remained blissfully ignorant, still attending church events, hosting gatherings, and standing proudly by her husband's side, unaware of the betrayal that had taken root in their marriage. Amara knew she couldn't go on like this. The pregnancy was a constant reminder of the life she had been forced into, a world she had never imagined. But what choice did she have? Malachai had made it clear: either she terminated the pregnancy, or he would have no choice but to cut ties with her. As the days wore on, Amara became more desperate. She sought counsel from people she trusted, but the church was her only support system, and Malachai was the very person she relied on. In the face of her anxiety, confusion, and fear, she was left with no one to turn to. It wasn't just the decision of whether or not to keep the child that consumed her. It was the realization that her life, her dreams, and her sense of self were all entangled in a web of lies spun by the very man she had once trusted above all else. The emotional isolation she felt was overwhelming, leaving her with only one option, a dark, irreversible path that would forever change her. She began to explore the idea of an abortion, a decision that weighed heavily on her conscience. She wasn't sure whether she was making it because it was what she truly wanted or because it was what Malachai demanded. But the longer she wrestled with it, the more she realized that she was no longer in control of her own life. In her despair, Amara found herself questioning everything: her faith, her values, and the choices that had led her to this moment. The man who had once been a beacon of light in her life was now the very person whose actions were dragging her into darkness. By February 2012, Amara could no longer bear the weight of her situation. She decided to meet with Malachai one final time, hoping for a resolution, for a sense of peace she had long been denied. The meeting took place in a private office at the church late one night. Amara was shaking with fear, her heart pounding in her chest. The moment she walked in, she could feel the tension between them. Malachai sat behind his desk, his face cold and unreadable. "What do you want, Amara?" Malachai's voice was calm, almost too calm. "Have you made up your mind?" Amara swallowed hard. "I don't know what to do, Malachai. I'm lost. You've left me with nothing but fear. You've manipulated me, controlled me, and now I'm pregnant with your child, and I don't know how to move forward." Malachai's expression hardened. "You don't have a choice. The pregnancy has to end. I told you what would happen if you didn't comply." It was then that Amara, overcome with emotion, shouted, "You don't care about me, you never have. You only care about yourself. About your church, your image. You've used me for your own selfish needs." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, the silence between them was suffocating. Malachai stood, his eyes narrowing as he stepped toward her. His voice was a low growl. "You have no idea what I've sacrificed for you, for this whole situation. Don't make me the villain here, Amara. You think you're the only one who's suffering?" Amara's eyes widened with a mix of shock and fear. This was not the man she had once admired. This was a man who would stop at nothing to protect his empire, even if it meant destroying her in the process. The confrontation ended in a blur of chaos, as Malachai's true nature was revealed in the cold, calculated way he tried to dismiss Amara's pain. That night, as Amara left the church, she felt the weight of her decision. Her fate, now sealed, would have repercussions beyond her comprehension. 2 weeks later, Amara's body was found in a luxury hotel room under mysterious circumstances. The details surrounding her death would become the focal point of a police investigation that would uncover a world of deception, control, and betrayal. As the truth slowly unraveled, the public's image of Malachai Grant, once a beloved pastor and spiritual leader, would forever be tarnished. In the aftermath, a wave of grief, anger, and disbelief swept through the kingdom of light. Those who had once trusted Malachai now found themselves questioning everything they had ever believed. The tragic death of Amara Hayes would serve as a grim reminder of the dangers that lurked behind the mask of power and influence. Amara's death sent shockwaves through the kingdom of light and the surrounding community. As news of her passing spread, it became clear that the tragedy wasn't just a personal loss, it was a dark and complicated story of manipulation, power, and lies. The police were called to investigate, and what initially appeared to be a suicide or accidental overdose quickly became a high-profile case with whispers of foul play surrounding the circumstances. Detective Simone Black, a seasoned investigator known for her no-nonsense approach to cases, was assigned to the case. She arrived at the luxury hotel where Amara's body was found, stepping into a world that was as pristine and controlled as the church Malachai led. The room was neat, almost too neat, with no signs of a struggle or violent altercation. But something about it felt off. Upon closer inspection, Detective Black found a journal hidden beneath the bed, Amara's personal reflections, scribbled thoughts, and perhaps most damning of all, a detailed account of her troubled relationship with Malachai. The journal spoke of broken promises, emotional manipulation, and the increasingly controlling behavior of the man she had once looked up to. It became clear to the detective that Amara had been deeply conflicted in her last months, torn between her feelings for Malachai and the cruelty she had come to recognize in his character. In a final entry, Amara wrote, "I don't know how much more of this I can take. He says he loves me, but I'm starting to think he only loves himself. I feel like I'm drowning, and there's no way out." Detective Black immediately started digging into Malachai's past. The more she uncovered, the more disturbing the picture became. Malachai had been grooming Amara from the very start, using his position as a spiritual leader to manipulate her emotions and control her life. As the investigation deepened, more women came forward, revealing similar stories of manipulation, coercion, and abuse of power under the guise of faith. But what struck the detective the most was the connection between Malachai's desire to maintain the perfect image of the kingdom of light and his wife, Vanessa. The church was everything to Malachai, more than his family, more than his own well-being. The faade of a perfect pastor's family was the cornerstone of his influence, and Amara had become a threat to that image. Meanwhile, Vanessa Grant was struggling with her own suspicions. As her husband's public life crumbled under the weight of the investigation, cracks began to appear in their marriage. She had always admired Malachai's strength, his unwavering faith, but the lies, the manipulation, and the secrets started to surface. She was confronted by the truth: Amara was pregnant with her husband's child, and the affair had been going on for much longer than she could have imagined. Vanessa's world shattered as she pieced together the truth. The woman who had trusted her husband the most had been the one he had destroyed with the cruelest of betrayals. The pain of her discovery was raw and deep, and yet it was not enough to sway her from the vision she had built around her husband. The power and status of the kingdom of light still held an allure over her, and she fought the urge to protect her own reputation. But as the investigation into Amara's death intensified, Vanessa was forced to confront the possibility that Malachai had gone too far. She sought solace in the church's teachings, but her faith in both the institution and her husband was faltering. One evening, Vanessa confronted Malachai in their home, demanding the truth. She wasn't prepared for the storm that would follow. He denied everything at first, his usual charm and lies pouring out with ease. But when Vanessa presented the evidence, the journal, the testimonies of other women, and the mounting suspicions of law enforcement, Malachai's faade began to crack. "You've ruined everything," Vanessa said, her voice breaking. "This church, my life, everything we built. It's all lies. You've been lying to me for years." Malachai's face twisted in rage. "You don't understand. I did what I had to do to protect this ministry, to protect us. Amara was nothing more than a means to an end. The truth of his manipulations, of his willingness to destroy anyone, even those closest to him, for power, was now laid bare." But even in the face of this reckoning, Vanessa hesitated. The final blow would come soon, but she was not yet ready to accept it. The investigation reached its peak as more damning evidence against Malachai was uncovered. Police found traces of sedatives in Amara's system, and the forensic evidence suggested that her death was far from accidental. Detective Black quickly arrested Malachai on charges of manslaughter, emotional abuse, and orchestrating a scheme that led to Amara's death. His betrayal of both his wife and his congregation had led him down a path of no return. As Malachai was led out of his mansion in handcuffs, the kingdom he had built crumbled around him. The church, once a symbol of strength and power, was now a place of shame. The congregation was divided, some still loyal to the man they thought they knew, others horrified by the truth. In North, the court of public opinion, Malachai's name became synonymous with corruption, manipulation, and the darkest aspects of the human soul. Vanessa, now a widow in name, disappeared from the public eye, retreating from the life she had once known, her own faith shattered by the truth. As the months passed, the memory of Amara Hayes continued to linger. The child she had carried, whose future had been so brutally erased, became a symbol of the innocence lost in the wake of Malachai's reign. Her family, devastated by her death, found solace in knowing that Amara had been strong in her final moments, trying to break free from the toxic grip of a man who had destroyed so much. Her journal was published posthumously, and it resonated with many who had lived in the shadows of powerful men like Malachai. Amara became a martyr for the broken, the betrayed, and the silenced. Her story inspired others to speak out to fight against the darkness that still lurked in places of power. Malachai Grant was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to life in prison. His once thriving ministry was dismantled, with its members scattering in the wake of the scandal. His name would be forgotten, replaced by the legacy of a woman who had dared to stand against him. Vanessa, struggling with the aftermath, disappeared from the public eye, retreating into the quiet of her broken faith. As for the kingdom of light, its halls would forever echo with the tragic story of a woman who had lost her life, but whose strength had outlived the lies that tried to silence her. Though the darkness of Amara's story still lingered in the hearts of those who knew her, there was a glimmer of hope in the aftermath. The world had seen the devastation that blind faith and unchecked power could wreak, but it had also witnessed the courage of a woman who fought for truth. And while the kingdom of light fell into obscurity, the fight for justice continued to inspire many, ensuring that the story of Amara Hayes would never be forgotten.